Hello and welcome to episode 203 of the Strettycast. I am your host, Dale O'Donnell. I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Murphy as well as our good friend Shaun Connolly. Place your bets on who will be first to mispronounce a target as we talk transfers, Dan Ashworth's arrival, Old Trafford naming rights, and more on the Strettycast. So the boys are back in town. To get things started, I want to give a special welcome to Shaun Connolly, back to the Strettycast as a guest after recently setting up Theatre of Red. Just to get everyone up to date with the conversation and where we are currently, tell us what you've learned from covering the Eric Ten Hag saga earlier on this summer, and as well as that, how is everything going with Theatre of Red?
Yeah, man, it's lovely to be back with these two distinguished individuals. The sex appeal is absolutely oozing from both of you. It's all going good. It's all going good. Like you know yourself, when you're passionate about something, especially as we are about this football club, it's easy to spend your days talking and writing about it, and you allow yourself to become a little bit more fixated and immersed within the information that's going on. I think on a day by day basis, we're seeing growth and we're getting good reception and response across social platforms, from site down to the podcast that's released on a weekly basis. So I couldn't really ask for more than how it's going. In the context of Eric Ten Hag, I think it's been, on one side of it, it's been a breath of fresh air that there's little to no leaks per se. You saw a lot of speculation on a daily basis, which maybe insinuated that X, Y, or Z had information about Eric Ten Hag and had information about what was happening. And then ultimately that was disproven. And a lot of people suffer the ramifications of maybe telling a few porkies along the way. But I think with Eric Ten Hag, there's obviously an awful lot of innuendos playing out, because we saw how many various managerial names linked with the role, that they were going through their interviewing process, which was obviously related to succession planning. And it's good to see that. It's good to see ownership that have got foresight about what could potentially go wrong, because all three of us have been supportive of Eric Ten Hag for as long as we've been speaking. We want to see a manager that's given the opportunity to stand by a project. We want to see a manager who's going to be able to start something on day one and move forward, and that he can continue doing it in 3, 4, 5 years. Not that it's this rinse and repeat nonsense of sacking a manager every 14 months. And realistically speaking, when you look at the likes of Dan Ashworth coming in, which is the biggest draw of all, and that the fact that he's going to be able to start working from day dot, it's a fantastic situation, because this is a guy that obviously is quoted in saying that he doesn't want the football model to represent something about bringing a manager in and getting rid of them every 14 months. Because ultimately you have to rip up your book, you have to change the project and the principles that you're trying to align the club to. And then you have anywhere up to 16, 17, 18 footballers that are going to be tied to that previous manager. So I suppose what I have learned from the last time we spoke on this podcast to today is that the number one thing is there's not as many leaks coming out of the club anymore, which is a fantastic thing to be able to embrace. But furthermore, we have seen football individuals make football decisions. And I think Jim Radcliffe and Dave Brailsford and Jean-Claude Blanc would very much have liked to have Dan Ashworth there 2 months ago, 3 months ago. As we saw in his Bloomberg interview, he said he was not quite prepared for the gardening leave that is associated with football, and it's something that he didn't factor into his decision making. But I think now, as we're in July and we're approaching a new dawn, we've got this best-in-class backroom hierarchy that's been configured. And the manager has obviously received the backing of these individuals to be able to lead this forward. So it's a good sign that we're not having leaks. It's a good sign that we have football individuals making decisions instead of accountants making football decisions. And we have yet to wait and see as to the benefits of what this is going to have in moving forward. But from today, it certainly looks a lot better than it did 12 months ago.
You mentioned something important about the leaks, and you're right, because I felt a lot of the stories that were coming out and being briefed were coming out from some of those managerial candidates that had been interviewed. And it was their agencies that had a motive to maybe get the story out there. And if you think about it, De Zerbi was looking for a new job this summer. And it made sense for his agency to be associated with the Manchester United job. And what I found actually while covering it was the lack of respect all these other managers have for a man that's in a current job. You know, football is a bit wild sometimes. If you look back at videos, maybe in the 70s and 80s of football managers on TV, there was a bit more decorum, a bit more respect about them and how they carried themselves as sports figures. Whereas it's it's more cutthroat than ever, I think. It's really kind of, fuck you, I want to get my backside in there. Brian, Shaun briefly touched on Dan Ashworth's arrival. Does that give everyone kind of a sense right now that, right, we mean business? Or should we kind of reserve judgment with this being the first summer of Radcliffe and Blanc and all these guys kind of operating at the club?
On paper, and I saw a lovely diagram or visual description of what way it works and who's in what role during the week. On paper, it looks really good. It looks like they're assembling a team of guys specific for each role. It looks like the focus has changed. We've gone from being a team that was very much focused on commercialism and utilizing the brand globally and literally forgetting that we're at the core of it, we're a football team. And they've highlighted that from day one, that the focus has to be on the first team, the focus has to be on the pitch. Everything else is secondary to that. So I like the way they're going about it. I like the fact they're appointing people specifically for each role. But if you even relate it back metaphorically to a football team, you can't buy 11 new players and expect it all to click day one. It's going to take time. One or two of them might not perform in the role. You have to be a little bit realistic and give them time to bed into a new club, give them time to bed into a new system under a new regime. See how it works out, but it's going to obviously have an effect, an immediate effect. How big an immediate effect it has, I don't know. If you look at the transfer targets, it looks like maybe the focus is a little bit different to what it was previously, and the profile of player has changed a bit. So that's encouraging. I do think, though, we need to sit back and relax a little bit. Don't expect miracles overnight, and let these boys work and kind of start building a squad, building an ethos in the club. And as I said, it's not guaranteed that each boy in each role is going to succeed straight away. So it's going to have to take time to get this team together and eventually see a click. Might see a couple of changes in personnel over the next 1 to 5 years of lads who are in those roles. But as I say, on paper, it looks pretty good.
It looks incredibly good. And you know the thing, when I hear you speaking about this is something I've been thinking about for the last few days. When speculation broke that compensation had been agreed with Dan Ashworth, I mean, he's joining a new CEO in Omar Barada, yeah? And Barada is going to be starting in a couple of days. Jason Wilcox has come in as a technical director. You've got Christopher Vell coming in, I suppose, temporarily as a head of recruitment. But if that works out, then there's a line that he could stay there for the foreseeable future. Everybody is going to be answerable to Dave Brailsford, and Jean-Claude Blanc is going to be thereabouts in the background. Now, when you consider that team as a whole, realistically speaking, it is about as impressive a show of strength and determination for betterment as we could possibly have seen. And I think from the off, you know, with everything that Jim Radcliffe is trying to achieve, it's a desire for elite hierarchy that has been a fundamental requirement to improve the environment for Eric Ten Hag, for the players, for the coaching staff, for everybody. And I know, like you're saying, it can't be remedied over the course of a transfer window, because the damage that the Glazers has created and the cancer that they've inflicted on the club is going to take many, many years to alleviate, because you're talking 2 decades. But that said, the one thing about this is the principles that can be installed alongside the new manager and the staff. And I think for me, when you focus solely on this super team of backroom excellence that's after being created, in my lifetime, I have never witnessed a single overhaul of a footballing department in a major football club, anything like this. Did either of you anticipate when Radcliffe came in that we were going to see that in one transfer window in a matter of a couple of months, the amount of people that have actually come to fruition there?
I think people would have expected a bit of an overhaul, but not to this degree of, say, Omar Barada shocked everyone that United were able to get him to the club. And as you mentioned, how quick they've managed to secure even, Ashworth took a while, that was delayed, but everything is now in place in the first summer with how many months? 2 months to go of transfers, and it's like perfect. It would have been if Ashworth was in before the start of the transfer window, but I don't think it could get much better. But again, I think in terms of expecting miracles, that's not going to happen with a squad overall, and people have to be somewhat realistic. I think in terms of strategy, which Brian briefly mentioned, maybe looking at players of 25 or 24 and younger, what I'd be looking at is we're in the Europa League next season. And if you look at Bayer Leverkusen building a young side to compete in the Europa League, with potential to go on to do better things, adapt the model like that. That is our standard right now. We all said it on the podcast last season that we're not Champions League standard. We're not. We were in the Champions League this season and we got our arse shown to us. I think the Europa League is our standard, and we should have a really good go at it next season. And maybe consider that as part as our approach to transfers this summer. Because Brian, is there any point going out there trying to sign this player who is hell bent on playing Champions League every year? Because we've signed them in the past. They come, and when they're not playing Champions League, they kick up a stinker. We need to get people that want to play for Man United.
I think they need to start identifying players that they're not coming solely to, I suppose, to further their career and use this as a stepping stone per se. They need to be coming for the right reasons, coming because they want to play for a club of our stature. They respect the fact that we're still a footballing giant, and they respect the fact that joining Man United is a massive, massive deal in anyone's career. Like to play for Man United should be the pinnacle of your career as opposed to coming to us and stepping on. So I do like the fact, like the couple of lads we've been linked to so far, very different profile to what you would have expected over the last decade. It's not big household names on massive wages. It's not lads coming to the end of their career, one last payday. It looks a bit more calculated and a bit more, we're kind of aiming for the future. Even they were going for that boy off Everton, Brantwaite. Now they seem to have changed their focus and gone for, well, supposedly, if you believe all the rumours, they're going for De Ligt. It looks like a more calculated decision. It's less money. It's potential to be a fantastic player. I just like it. Like we've talked about it on this podcast numerous times. There is a place, obviously. I thought in the striker department you could have brought in maybe an older striker. I'm not talking a Finnish striker, but maybe an older striker last season to come in and work with Highland, because obviously Martial wasn't doing it and we had no other option there. So we were a bit light up top. The fact that we've gone through that season, that's done and dusted. Seeing him look at maybe another younger striker, yeah, gives me a little bit of confidence in the fact that these boys are thinking long term. It's not just a quick fix. It's not a Zlatan or a Cavani or a Nigalo. It's looking at going, right, we need something. Obviously, we need it now, but we also need it next season, the season after, the season after. So it shows a bit of foresight. And the fact that they're identifying the personnel of players in that age bracket, and probably not going for lads who are going to demand stupid money, or they're not getting bullied in the market straight away. If we're to believe the stories we're reading, that needed to happen a long, long time ago, because United tax, the same as English player tax, was a very, very real thing. If any other club went for a player for 25 million, we were paying 40, 45. So we need to change that. We need to stop getting bullied in the market because, oh, United are loaded, they can afford it. We can screw them for as much as we want. We need to turn around and start bullying clubs back and go, look, if that's the price. If you're not selling them for that, grant, there's plenty of other players. Fuck off and we'll do it ourselves. That's one of the core fundamentals that has to change with the on the pitch vision. Not getting bullied into paying stupid wages, which can obviously cause eruptions in the dressing rooms. It's players you can't get rid of afterwards, which you obviously get stuck with players. You buy a fella like, look, I'm not saying Anthony is on the way out, but you buy a lad like Anthony in that profile, and his career goes the way it has gone with United. He hasn't set the world alight, and you're giving him 200, hypothetically, you're giving him 200,000 a week. Very hard to get them off the books afterwards, so you get stuck with them. Whereas if you're bringing in targets that are on a lesser, kind of more realistic wage, with a more realistic personnel or character, if things don't actually work out, you can still shift them for decent money, because the club coming for them can, I won't say match the wages, but give them something realistic to match the expectations. Whereas if you're giving them monster contracts, you're in trouble. They're going to sit there, take that wage. Why would I possibly leave when I can sit here and rot away in the reserves on $250,000 a week? So it's a good mindset going forward, and something we've all been crying out for.
I don't want to speak too soon because the deal hasn't been done. But again, if you believe what's being reported with De Ligt, we went with Brandtwaite at first, and there was reports that Everton wanted 80 million for him, around that ballpark. And United's first bid was below 40 million in the 30 region. So it looks like we can get De Ligt for under 40 million pounds. So, it shows that when we went into a different club, that they knew already, Bayern knew that we had been given a price for a player that we wanted, but we stood our ground. And that can be an example then that can maybe spread throughout the transfer market when we go to players that these new owners at United, they won't have the wool pulled over their eyes.
I know we're going to deal with transfers coming up shortly on the podcast, but just while we're on the topic of De Ligt, can I ask you a question about him? Because I remember there was a big hype about De Ligt a couple of years back. He was at Ajax and he was the next big thing. He was a shiny new toy and he did massive, massive career ahead of him. Why, I suppose my questions are, why, number one, are a club like Bayern Munich happy enough to sell him for what looks to be a reasonable price? Why is he looking to move? And what's happened with his career? I haven't followed it. I've seen it, claims about injuries and whatnot, but it looks like on paper as a signing, he's a big-ish name, massive potential, could be demanding a way higher figure than what's being quoted. Does something not smell a little bit off? Am I being a conspiracy theorist, or is there something amiss here? No,
I don't think you're being a conspiracy theorist. No, it's very, very credible, because I think one of the easiest things to look at in European football is when you're talking about the real big powerhouses like Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona. They tend not to want to get rid of their players until they actually want to get rid of them. So then when you're looking at a 24-year-old central defender who should really not even be close to his prime yet, you'll be wondering, why are you happy to cut your losses and get rid of him? So from that stance, it does look well. What you're saying about the injuries is valid as well, because look, the sum total of this is that he's after missing 67 games in 7 years. So, like, you're talking about a guy that really broke onto the scene at Ajax at a very, very young age. Interesting fact, he became the youngest player to start a European final when Ajax played against us in the Europa League final. And he's the youngest player ever to start a European final with that. But he's picked up niggling injuries across the board. And I think even though there has been a lot of games missed, there's a lot made of it because in 2021, he had a pretty significant shoulder injury. And that shoulder injury kept him out for something like over 100 days. And it really, really messed him up. I draw a lot of comparisons with the way his body has been held in this early stages to when Vidic came to United. He's very, very susceptible to picking up little niggling injuries because of where he puts his body. And that's one of the fundamental things for him. He's not afraid to stick his head in somewhere. He's not afraid to stick his body somewhere he shouldn't. And he ends up picking up these little niggling little injuries that catch him, just like it did with Vidic. I'm trying to look at the Matthijs de Ligt thing in a very, very good avenue, not necessarily looking at it negatively, looking at it more so like, why are Bayern trying to get rid of him? But at the same time, he was at Juventus. Bayern purchased him, and you would imagine that a club that's set together in such a good stall like Bayern Munich are, that they're kind of like the type of benchmark that we should try to be achieved and trying to hit Real Madrid, that we have a best-in-class setup that's doing its due diligence to bring these players into the football club. You'd imagine Bayern did the same thing when they spent all that money bringing him from Juventus. So it's possible that there could be a mental thing there. He might just be a very temperamental character that hasn't really hit the ground since he left Ajax, because you must remember he broke onto the scene very, very early. I would like to look at it based on everything that we have seen and everything we know. Yes, Bayern are happy to cut their losses in him, but he has also requested to leave Bayern Munich. And you must remember as well that Bayern Munich are absolutely inundated with central defenders. They have a catalogue of central defenders at the football club. And it's a situation where under Thomas Tuchel, he really, really saw his game time limited. And when I say limited, he was still hitting about 30 games per season. But he fell out of favour with Thomas Tuchel. And that one move has really, really led him to maybe fall down the pecking order ever so slightly and become disillusioned in Germany. So that's something that I think is quite much you need to look at with it. Like,
I wanted to play devil's advocate, and I wanted to touch on that, the amount of centre backs that Bayern have and always have. Every summer they seem to be either picking up one or two from the Bundesliga that have been impressing, and it seems to be a cycle of almost always having the next best thing coming at centre back. Now, what I will say about his time at Juventus, I think he was quite unlucky, because the season everyone really spoke about him was when they got to the semi-finals, Ajax, of the Champions League, and I believe he was captain of that side under Erik ten Hag. He was a ball-playing centre-back. Was very, very good at cutting lines and coming out with the ball. And at Juventus, he wasn't being asked to do that. And I think that was a transition that, as a young centre-back, he was bound to struggle with. Now, I think that at Bayern, I could be just making excuses for him, but that merry-go-round of having centre-backs every year, and I'm just maybe hoping that if he does come, the one thing that we can put down to his career to date is that when he played under Erik ten Hag, he had the potential to become a world beater. That's what he looked like he was on the verge of becoming. And this is a player that, right, some questionable traits from his time at Juventus and Bayern, but he's 24 and he might need this United switch as much as we need him. You know, if you think of
Exactly.
it that way.
Another thing you have to realize as well, and I thought you were going to draw on it when you said with Juventus there, when he arrived at Juventus, he was incredibly young, and he was coming into a team that had Giorgio Chiellini inside in there. So the whole idea was that he was going to learn alongside Chiellini, and he was going to develop. Within the opening month of him going there, Chiellini got injured, and he was then thrust into the limelight, and he was the main central defender as a young kid who had come out of an Ajax system that was built around Erik ten Hag's style of play. And as you said, it's a totally different systematic role that he was put into in Juventus. And he didn't have Chiellini beside him in a totally different league, because I know you're going back a few years and Serie A was trying to build itself back up to where it is today, but it was still a far more competitive league than Holland was. So I do think he's been quite unlucky with a couple of things in that side of it too.
I suppose, look, again, I am playing devil's advocate in this transfer because I have my suspicions about it, but the reports say that we're the only club, I don't want to say the only club in for him, but they don't seem to link any other club with him. Any time historically that we seem to be the only club involved in a transfer, it makes me worry because, again, if this guy has this potential at this cost, at his age, you'd imagine people would be sniffing around him big time. So it's another concern of mine. I might be reading the whole story wrong. I might be misjudging the player. He could be the best things in slice pan. What I do like about the profile of him coming in is the age, the fact he's a right-footed. Am I right in saying right-footed? Yeah, he's a right-footed centre half. So if you look at him slotting in beside Martinez, it fits the profile of what we want: left-sided left centre back, right-sided right centre back. Everything screams to me that he's a lovely-looking player and has what we're looking for. There's just those little doubts in my mind about what happened, or why is he not hitting the peak, or why is he not worth so much money. But again, like you've covered, the Juventus thing didn't work out. Granted, he was a young lad thrust into a hard situation. Bayern may have just not worked out because it might just not fit him as a player. People do move clubs and it doesn't work out and they don't feel at home there and whatnot. I suppose I've been bitten so many times before with so many transfers where they've gone tits up. I'm at that stage where I look at almost every transfer and go, what's the downside to this one?
I think
Well,
sorry,
Sorry, go
Dale,
ahead.
I think when you really analyze it, right, he's had the 5 seasons since he left Ajax. And in those 5 seasons, people sort of lament on this sort of injury prowess and the fact that he's unavailable. I've just looked at it as we're speaking there, and season by season, he's gone 39 appearances, 36, 42, 43. And that was 3 at Juventus, and then the season under Julian Nagelsmann at Bayern Munich. He hit 30 appearances under Thomas Tuchel. So I really think that was the largest thing that made him fall out of love with what was happening in Bayern, and that he was slightly disillusioned with it.
Just the other thing as well, in terms of interest, there has been reports from PSG, but when they came out in the last few days that they were going to attempt to hijack United's bid, it was then strongly briefed from the players' representatives that they weren't interested in talks to any other club, that De Ligt had told his agents that only to speak to United. So that would then tell other clubs to not bother wasting time or to even try, because his heart must be set on working with Erik ten Hag and coming to United. Like I do believe that it could be a match in heaven, in the sense that his career kind of feels like it's in a bit of a crossroads. He may be realistic to kind of think that, right, I might have to reassess my situation, maybe concede not playing Champions League football next season. But the opportunity to play for Manchester United only comes around so often. It could be a good move for him, and to go back working with Erik ten Hag. And with a centre back he'd be partnered with that came from Ajax as well. I know people will throw the kind of the criticism out there about this target and say that, oh, it's another Erik ten Hag boy, it's another Dutch player, it's another Ajax player, and that's fair enough. But what I'll say to them is, De Ligt was linked to Manchester United when he was at Ajax last. We were one of the clubs that were interested in signing him, but Juventus got in first. So is it really a Ten Hag signing? This is a player that's been on United's radar for some time. And like I mentioned, when he was at Ajax, he looked like he was on the verge of becoming a world beater. He was incredible that season.
Agreed. And you've hit the nail on the head there. United have been interested with him ever before Erik ten Hag arrived. But furthermore, what you have to take into consideration here, we've spent time speaking about Dan Ashworth, Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox. They are now the fundamental individuals that are going to be spearheading incomings and outgoings out of the football club. So regardless of the profile of the player that he played under Ten Hag, he's Dutch, all of these particular variables, it's not Ten Hag's situation to sign off on these players anymore. So Ten Hag cannot be held accountable for players coming in or out of the club anymore. This is down to the best-in-class hierarchy that we've been speaking about.
This new lad that's coming in, I won't even pretend to know who he is or what he does, but this new fella's come in for recruitment previously at Chelsea at one stage. Can you two boys educate me and the listeners who he is, what he's about, what he does, what's his talent? He's not someone I know anything about, and I won't ever pretend to know something about something I don't. Fill me in on who is this guy.
Well, I can tell you, Brian, I haven't a Scooby, so I can't help you on that front. I'm hoping for the best in class.
Shaun.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Christopher Vivel is who you're speaking about, yeah? His whole role is recruitment and scouting. So it's kind of like, I suppose in a simplistic point of view, take a fellow working inside in a call center and he gets very, very good at working in a call center, and eventually he becomes a team lead. That's kind of what his role is. He went from being a very proficient scout to leading the line as somebody who's so proficient in what he is that he's able to delegate work within scouting departments, and he's able to lead in that sort of recruitment line. He's very, very good at sort of picking out those targets and offering proper advice and solicitation towards the likes of Wilcox, who's ultimately going to be delivering it to Dan Ashworth.
He's very young, is he not? He's early to mid-30s. Big role for a fellow at this age. Am I wrong, or is he quite young?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know his age, but I suppose in basing off the roles, you're looking at a guy that was at Chelsea, so he has some bit of an idea as to how an upper echelon Premier League club will work. I know Chelsea are nowhere near the level of Manchester United, but he's going to have some bit of nous behind him, and he's working with that sort of backroom team that we've discussed as well.
Yeah, I think he's like 36 or something. Again, anytime you see someone at that age profile coming into football, barring the likes of Kieran McKenna and whatnot, I just look and go, Jesus, this is a big job for a guy of that age. You'd almost expect someone with a lot more of a CV behind him, but brave move, and if he's the dog's bollocks, so be it. As long as we don't start replicating Chelsea offering 25-year contracts and all that kind of jazz.
What I think is interesting is with Dan Ashworth now spearheading this, that if you look back to Brighton and the work he did there, they became like at the head front of sport or science and data and whatnot, making use of that to assign the best players. So I think you'd look at someone's age, but I think what they're looking at is he someone that can use that data in an efficient way to pick the right players for United? Because that's the thing about most of us that cast a verdict on a potential signing. I don't know how to use the stats to identify whether he works properly for United. And I don't think United have had the people to do that in recent years, looking at the signings we've made. We haven't even mentioned, Jadon Sancho yet. A player could leave this summer. But United signed him after apparently scouting him for a year or two and then played him on the opposite wing that he was so used to playing with. Decisions like that cannot be made when you're paying over a certain amount for a player.
Neil, is that in a roundabout way you admitting to not understanding what all these XG bullshit is about, like myself?
I haven't a Scooby. XG. Well, I tell you, no, I can appreciate XG a little bit more than you, because I can look at it after a game and say, right, XG is all right or whatever. Like, it reads well. But I wouldn't look into it too deep and to say, right, that's the striker that we need to sign because his XG that season was good.
Do you not think that
It is.
XG is the most insane level of fucking waffle when someone
It
tells you
can't
that
be
they
ignored
should?
though. It shouldn't be ignored though.
Of course it should. Look at when you're talking about stats. These fucking statisticians and all these stats that are coming into football, it's gone so fucking scientific and anal. Kobe Mainoo for England. I know we're not international football fans. Kobe Mainoo has been fucking amazing for England. Standout player when he's played. But his ball progression forward stats are minus. Who gives a fucking shit about his ball forward carrying progression stats or his XG tackles? Look at it. Did he play well? Yeah. That's all you need to know. Football is going down the toilet with the likes of this Aaron Moniz fucking stones, with all these stupid XG stats and his this stat and that stat. Grow up and just watch football. Is he good or is he not? If he is, brilliant. If he's not, he's shite. Simple
No.
as
Just
that.
before
Get
you,
over it.
just before you jump in, Shaun, I honestly believe that there's 50% of the people listening to this podcast with their hands in their face in pure disagreement, and then there's 50% that are in total agreement with what you're saying. Maybe it could be a little bit more or less on either side, but it's close.
It's 50% that have their head in their hands going, what is this fella talking about? I'm not messing, lads. Football has gone to a level where it's become so boring due to scientific analysis of every fucking aspect of the game. Is he a good player? Yes. Is he a bad player? Yes. Does his ball progression stats add up? Grow the fuck up. Just watch football and get on with your life and stop being such a fucking dope. Shaun, by the way, I know Shaun's going to absolutely murder me, put me on a pedestal here and shoot me in the forehead in a head kill shot, but I'm ready for it. Come on,
Go on,
Connolly, give
Shaun.
it to me.
No. I mean, I understand the debate between XG and the analysis with all that. I get that it's for some people and it's not for some people. I'm not going to dispute whether or not every single individual that looks at football should buy that Bible. The one thing that I will say, as prominent as those sort of statistics, like you're talking about ball progression and you're talking about XG, as prominent as they've become in 2024, you must remember this dates back far, far further than this, and people don't realize it. If you're talking about football alone, you're just going back to the time when Harry Redknapp was at Spurs, and they started using this advanced data to be able to analyze and to categorize that Gareth Bale was not suited as a fullback. Gareth Bale was indeed far more suited as a winger. And they took that using analytics and data that were available to him about his forward runs, his pace. And that's how they established that he was a better attacker than he was a defender. And ultimately, we saw how that came to fruition. It doesn't necessarily work with every single footballer, obviously, but these are real statistics. They're real figures. And if you want to go out of football and go even further back, you look at Moneyball and the whole story about that baseball team that devised their entire recruitment policy about specific metrics that players use. So, as I know it can get convoluted, and I know a lot of people can base far too many of their arguments about it, but this is real data and it's not make believe. You know, a lot of people can maybe bring it down to death and they can bore with it, but it is genuine data.
I think the people in the recruitment team making decisions about, and even scouts and all that, they have to know their shit when it comes to this. But what I think is that it's quite complicated. I think there's many football clubs out there that are spending lots of money to make better hires in this department, to get the best people that understand stats. I think that's very difficult. I think there's lots of people out there that don't know how to use them to their best advantage. Like they all have access to stats. Everyone can get up to this, up to that, or stats zone or whatever. But it's about finding the people that can use it efficiently and the right way. It can be done. The most successful teams are using it, but it's about finding the people that can implement.
I read a quote today, and I won't lie, it was during work, so I kind of only glanced over it, but I could be wrong in saying it was from Laurie Whitwell's article, but it says that we've got the best scouting network in the world or something along those lines, that our scouting network is absolutely phenomenal. Nobody could touch our scouting network. What do you make of a statement like that?
I think it definitely holds credence and there is credibility in it. A lot of people are disillusioned by the sort of acquisitions we have and the players that we let go by us. it's not that we haven't identified players over the last 2 decades. It's the decisions made by the individuals that are signing the checks that decide, no, we don't want that. Because so many times there's been options presented that are like 17, 18-year-old talents, and they're not the marquee signings that, that represent this ideal that Manchester United can do things that no other side can do in the transfer market. So the players have been there. I mean, there is an extensive scouting network available within the club. It's just the individuals that were prioritizing decisions choose to ignore them.
That is exactly the stuff that I've heard. I spoke to one scout that worked at United that left United to work for City. He was based in South America. He just felt that his recommendations were just always going unheard. And went to City and worked for them because he felt that he was being heard. There is some truth in what Shaun says about profile. I spoke to one football agent who had 2 or 3 players at United, which were South American. And I remember speaking to him last summer and asking her the summer before about Julian Alvarez and United missing out on that one, and kind of why do United not take more notice of the South American market? And his view was that they don't care because these guys don't sell shirts initially. The guys that come from Brazil at 17 and whatnot don't sell shirts initially. And that's from top to bottom what we've seen for the past 18 years. You touched on it, Brian, how the drive was usually commercially driven. That's things you're hoping will change now. And we can actually make use of some of the, I think, good scouts that we've got working at the club. We have good scouts that just go ignored. We can now hopefully take advantage of that. And there's some players in the Championship too, not just South America, and even lower, League One, League Two. Ronnie Edwards at Peterborough, 5 million. I think that would be a very good show for United, but it depends on what the scouts think.
It's another one you're saying there as well, and I'll be quiet then in 2 seconds for you, Brian. You just mentioned the Championship, and I know categorically from what I've been told and who I've been speaking to that Ben Shafe is another one at Coventry City that the club are looking at. And this was really, really intensified during the FA Cup semi-finals. So the network is there. The players are there. They are being advised. It's just about people taking the advice. That's all it is.
That's one of the things that you'd be hoping when this new structure comes in and the mindset changes and it's a focus on what we can do and maybe a more long-term focus, which is something we're screaming out for: squad depth, building for the future, having people coming in. If such and such a player is starting to age, injuries catching up with him, we have someone ready to come in the squad already, who knows the style of football we play, who has the same mind frame as the manager or the squad. A long-term, a plan like that we can continue to build on year. It's all well and good signing your superstars every summer and boys that'll sell shirts, but if they're gone after 2 or 3 seasons, they've sold a lot of shirts, but they're gone, and we've had no foresight whatsoever. Who comes next? What happens next? If we can change that mindset and this new team can come in and say, right, this player, Rasmus Højlund, for the sake of argument, is X age. By the time he's 25 or 6, we want to have someone ready to start coming in, competing with him, and eventually maybe taking over from him. That's the mindset of a club that's going to be successful long term. Changing the transfer strategy, not even just the transfer strategy, but the actual mind frame in the club of how do we progress and stay relevant, stay competitive, stay having people coming in when we're stuck. Like this season, one of the biggest problems we had this season was squad depth. And I've said it 100 times, no slight on the academy lads, because I love seeing academy lads coming through. When you're seeing a subs bench with 5, 6, 7 academy lads, it screams out, someone hasn't done their job here. Someone's fucked up. I know we had an injury crisis, but you still should have a relevant amount of depth, of sufficient quality that can come in and do a job. And it killed us on the pitch because there's times when we lost players and you go from a player of whatever level you want to call him, top class, world class, blah, blah, blah. The drop off to the guy who comes in to replace him is probably, it could be a prospect. It could be a guy who's starting out his career, a guy who's not anywhere near his own prime. And what it does for that kid, and it's one of the worst side effects of it, it fucking destroys him. Look at Omari Forson. He came on, looked pretty decent. The next game he came in, because we were stuck, we needed someone in that specific role. He didn't have a great game, and he got fucking roasted by our own fan base, who are the most fickle fan base on the planet, who will never ever stand by a young lad if he gets fucking roasted. Willie Kambala, another lad, great game, best centre back in the world against Liverpool. A week later, oh, he's fucking dog shit. You're putting lads that shouldn't be in that position because of necessity, because you haven't planned for the fact that if this guy's injured, we have X, Y, and Z behind him. If this guy starts to lose form and starts to age, we have this guy coming through. You're not in an emergency situation. Every summer, lads, the last decade, every summer, how many times have we sat back and gone, right, you could get rid of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You have a shitload of deadwood. We need X amount of players. And every season, year on and year on, it looks like we still need 3 or 4 players to get to that level. We shouldn't need that every summer. It shouldn't be a case of we badly need to plug that gap this season now for right midfield. We badly need a centre half. It should be a bit of a bit of common sense. Fair enough, that he's coming towards the end of it. Say Harry Maguire and his age profile. He's starting to get to the age where the next 2 or 3 years he'll be pushing on a bit. We should have a ready-made guy coming in, already on the books, or at least highlighted and half a deal done on the quiet, that we can then progress straight into that, and it's seamless, not fucking emergency panic buttons every summer.
Brian, in theory, it's good, but dare I say you're trying to simplify genius, because that is essentially what Alex Ferguson could do, and so many managers cannot do, is to be able to build a platform and a squad to give yourself that kind of structure, whereas every summer you're adding to the squad and you're adding maybe forward players to add competition, and you're not going into the summer every year pigeonholing different areas. If you look at football throughout the world in most clubs, every summer is a bit like that. The only time that we really truly experienced that was when Alex Ferguson was leading the ship, and when he had his squads, and he developed 3 squads, 3 fantastic squads, league winning squads. They won multiple league titles, but he did it in a way that, like, the most difficult thing is knowing when your team has reached that line, when to start changing, when starting to get rid of the best players. That's what Alex Ferguson was the best at. You look at Jurgen Klopp. If he stayed at Liverpool, would they have developed another title winning side? No, they were talking about how young their Carabao Cup winning team was, but it was older than the team they bet in the final. So, they didn't really do much when they were going to win the quadruple. So I think that is the most difficult thing in football, is to be able to set up your squad in a way that you're not panicking every summer to fill those holes.
I suppose, look, I'm looking at a perfect storm, and I might be simplifying it a bit too much, that you have all this ready-made stuff coming in. But if you are using that mind frame, granted, you may not have every piece in the puzzle and all the jigsaw sorted, but at least you might have a chance of a more seamless transition from, I don't know, pick a left back. Say Luke Shaw right now. There's questions about Luke Shaw going forward. Do we have a left back ready to come in, seasoned, not even seasoned, but like almost ready to come in, on the verge of breaking through? You're looking back to the academy, young Amas. You can't expect him to come in straight off the bat, no fucking top level experience, and all of a sudden hit the ground running. He's unbelievably amazing. Tyrell Malacia was in fucking Bermuda Triangle for 12 months. God knows where he's been. He hasn't, in fairness to the fella, he hasn't really had a chance to put much of a fucking career together at United so far. We don't really know what he's about. Maybe he could be the lad to take over, maybe not. I just want to see us with a bit more, I suppose, a bit more deviousness in the transfer market, where we're signing, developing talent a bit more. Fans to kind of accept the fact that, okay, we signed some lad for 5 million. He's not a big, massive household name. He's not going to sell shirts. But this lad has a potential to become that fucking household name, to become that shirt seller, if it works out. And if it doesn't work out, we've signed a player for handy money, on handy wages, who we can shift. I made a point of this last season. Mitoma with Brighton. If we had been the ones who signed Mitoma, I think he was signed for like 2 million. They'd be screaming on Twitter going, "Oh, is this the level we're at? Is this the standard we're at? We're signing fellas for 2 million." We couldn't do that because of the expectations. But if you do pick up the likes of a Mitoma for 2 million, and he turns out to be a decent player, you've got an absolute fucking steal. It works out amazing. If it doesn't work out, you can flog him anytime you want to, because you can afford to sell him for relatively the same money. Clubs taking him on are going to be able to match the wages. It's just a little bit of common sense. And I do think that this new shape structure we have coming in is going to start thinking that way. They're not going to start thinking about signing these Angel Di Marias and all this kind of bullshit. They're going to have a bit more cop on and show a bit more noose in the transfer market, rather than these big names hitting the ground for fucking massive money short sellers. It's not what we need. We've seen enough of it. It's time to change the tactics.
Well, the best example for that, Brian, is Daniel James. He's one of few players that we've actually made a profit of in recent years. Daniel James came the championship, and I think proved at his time at United that he was a capable player. Wasn't a world beater, but he went on and made profit and built his career elsewhere. Exactly. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you're buying these young players at 40 plus million and they have that big pressure when they come in, that adds to it. And when they make the mistake, like I actually think, just before we move on into the naming rights of Old Trafford conversation, I feared this with Brantwaite, with him coming in with the fee that Everton wanted from around 80 million, because you just know it's inevitable, right? Top quality young player, loads of ability and ceiling to reach the very, very top. And I think he was excellent last season. But you just know that with him coming in and potentially costing 70 to 80 million, that the second he makes a mistake, instantly he becomes the new Harry Maguire, right? Instantly. And that's a huge thing to take on. I wouldn't underestimate that, given how the media focused in on Harry Maguire. Brantwaite will get that. And that's why I just think that maybe shifting towards the lid, if we can get him for 40 million, I think that's really smart. And it shows the whole market that United aren't going to have their pants pulled down. No, fuck your United tax. These are different times.
The case is screaming out to me, and this one is Anthony. If Anthony was signed for half the money or whatever, a more realistic fee, the pressure and the abuse he'd get would be nowhere near it. When you sign a fella like that for an outrageous amount of money, pressure is there day one. You have to deliver. The second you get on that pitch, you have to be proven that you're worth 70, 80, 90 million. Take the price tag out of the conversation. It's a different conversation altogether. You'll be afforded more time to develop and grow and settle in. But if you're paying absolute top dollar for a player, that player has to hit the ground running or he's going to get fucking bonfired straight away.
I think ultimately, listening to both of you speak about this, when you're looking at the profit and sustainability margins that are there and the ramifications of 2 decades of mismanagement, ultimately the surgery that needs to be completed on the squad now, you've got 3, you've got 4 or 5 positions that need strengthening, And in the current market, you're talking about getting in guys that are anywhere between 25 to 40 million. You're not going to get world beaters. You're going to get guys like your Joshua Zirkzee, who has a release clause. You're going to get guys that you can bring in on a season loan with an option to buy at the end of that particular time. United may very well, as funny as it sounds, Dale, benefit from their own incompetence over the last 2 decades, because instead of going out and trying to find these mega money signings because you're trying to make a statement to a European market that is literally laughing at you, ultimately you have a situation where you are forced into buying a younger player with a lesser profile for less money that, as Brian said, if and when they come and it doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out, then you will be able to recoup the vast majority of what you're making when you're selling them. And ultimately as well, when you're bringing in these players, they don't command the same signing on fee. They don't command the same wages. And when they don't command the same wages, it makes it easy to offload them if it doesn't work out. So I know it's a funny thing to comprehend that after 2 decades of mismanagement and rain pouring through the rafters at Old Trafford, that ultimately we could be a benefactor of that mismanagement by being able to bring in players that actually want to play for Manchester United. They're not looking for a payday. They're looking to be able to establish themselves within a European giant that just needs a little bit of a kick up the arse to get going again. And if and when it doesn't work out, very similar to like you said with Dan James, we have the credibility and the credence to be able to make our money back on that.
I think there's one on the move this summer, potentially to Crystal Palace. I mentioned them already, Ronnie Edwards and Peterborough. And that's a deal that you could see go for potentially 5 million. And I can guarantee you're going to be talking double figures in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that's what we're essentially talking about, is maybe being quicker off the mark. We were offered Moises Caicedo before he came to Europe for under 5 million. And now all of a sudden, if we wanted to sign him, we're talking over 100 million. And it's only in a matter of a few years. I'm not saying that he's the player that could come in and change Manchester United and fix everything. It's just an example of the fee we were offered and his rise in value since coming to Europe is something that could have been achieved at Manchester United.
Exactly. And even though we're now in the new dawn of this new hierarchy, you have to wonder, have we missed a march on the likes of Archie Gray going from Leeds to Spurs? Now, I know Leeds would sooner sell us a coal than sell us something that's going to benefit us, but Leeds are also in a bit of financial predicament themselves, and Archie Gray is regarded as one of the most highly sought after young lads in the country. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to analyze this market, to be able to pick up a coup. Like you said, someone who's going for 5 million, you can 10 times that easy in the next 2 to 3 years, and they'll make
Where's
50,
the
60
risk?
million off them. Exactly.
Where's the
There is
risk?
none. There is no risk in it.
So moving on, I wanted to speak about a rather controversial one. Brian, the naming rights of Old Trafford, that's come up in the last few days with headlines, and it seems that they're going to consider selling the rights of Old Trafford, which could mean that a sponsor come in and change the name, something like Barcelona with the whatever they did with Spotify. It's something that is all over modern football. But is it necessary to move this way if we do want this state-of-the-art new stadium?
I suppose I'd always consider myself a traditionalist in my views on football and the fan culture. It's something I respect. It's something I always educated myself when I started going to football first. And I suppose as a young lad, starting to get involved in the whole football scene, I wanted to know the history of it and what way you behave, what way you carry yourself, and how you defend your club. And I suppose just the general attitude towards football. Selling the naming rights to Old Trafford, I honestly think it's something beneath us. I think we're a club that don't need to be doing something like that. I suppose it goes back to the conversation again. Do I want to have a new stadium? Not particularly. As a traditionalist, I suppose I cling on to this old kind of sentimentality around things, and I like things we have. I like the history. I like the kind of the romance around it. I I I, I think I'd actually be disgusted if these boys come in and buy into the club and all of a sudden we're the Apple Old Trafford or the Spotify Old Trafford. I honestly don't think we should need that. We're a club that's at a level where we should be able to develop ourselves financially. And we've proven in the last, I don't know, 20 years, we're a powerhouse in the commercial side of things. Look, Ed Woodward was able to bring fucking noodle sponsors, ice cream sponsors, wine sponsors. Everybody and anybody in the business world wants to be associated with a club like Man United. I don't think we need to flog the fucking name of the stadium, which an awful lot of fans are going to have an issue with, just to bring in that cash injection. There's other avenues we can go that'll be far less, I suppose, far less. What's the word I'm looking for? It'll round people up far less than if you go and fucking rename the stadium. It's again, if you ask fellas, do you want a new stadium or you don't want a new stadium? I think the people who'd be happy to build a new stadium would be far more open to the fact that, yeah, what's the matter? It's only the name, it's only this, it's only that. But it's not. It's our home, and I'm probably romanticising too much about it, but I like it. It's Old Trafford. I don't want the stadium to go, and I don't want it to fucking name it the Sainsbury's Old Trafford or the Morrison's Old Trafford. It's an avenue I don't think we need to approach just to raise that bit of cash. The club is capable of raising that money in far better ways, far less offensive to fans who would have a more traditional view.
I appreciate everything you're saying massively with that, and I share that. Maybe I'm just getting thicker and naiver as I get older. I don't know, but I'm going to that stadium since the '80s, and I consider it a second home. For many years, it was a second home. I was there far more than I was in my own home. But there's a couple of things that need to be taken into consideration with this. You look at Sir Jim Ratcliffe's interview with Bloomberg, which I thought was a very revealing interview. It was very good. One of the things that he mentioned in that really stood out to me, it was toward the end of the interview, and I don't know the lady's name from Bluebird that was interviewing him, but she deviated between Manchester United and politics, and she was speaking about the English political system, and then she started integrating politics and United into her conversation. She wrangled Jim into a way of speaking about it, and it brought him to a point where he likened the fact that the new Prime Minister in England, whoever it's going to be in the UK, is going to have to make unpopular decisions for the betterment of the country. And then he spoke about Manchester United, and he likened the exact same thing to it, that in certain scenarios, you have to make unpopular decisions that are going to benefit the organization as a whole in moving forward. That terrified me when I heard that, because even if it is going to benefit something in moving forward, the short-term ramifications are very, very, very dear to me, especially when we've had 2 decades of mismanagement. But when you dive into that article that got released by Crafton that time about the naming rights, one thing that did stand out was that if it was a situation that they were going for a refurbishment as opposed to a new build, the refurbishment, they would look for an associated partner with it. And in that, that's when you go towards the Barcelona style thing, that it remains Old Trafford, but you have, we'll say, just for pig iron's sake, Spotify Old Trafford. Nobody is going to call it Spotify Old Trafford, just for the basis of sponsorship and for the club to be able to release some form of article or some sort of invested associated partnership. You'll have Spotify written somewhere. And I'm not obviously we're not sponsored by Spotify, people. I'm just using an example. But the way it is, I mean, go a couple of yards down the road and you have Emirates Old Trafford in the cricket ground. Nobody calls it Emirates Old Trafford. There's Emirates plastered all over the cricket ground, but it's still Old Trafford cricket ground. I think the real issue is going to come to fruition if they make the decision to build a new stadium. Because if they make the decision to build a new stadium, it seems totally apparent that they are 100% on board selling the naming rights of Old Trafford to be able to fund at least a portion of the new build. So if they're going towards a refurbishment, it looks like we could have Dale O'Donnell Old Trafford, Brian Murphy Old Trafford. If we're going for a brand new stadium, God only knows what we could be playing inside.
Uncertain times. But look, I kind of sitting on the fence with this one. I totally agree with Brian that changing it should be beyond the club of our stature because we're Manchester United. But then you look at the way Shaun put it, in that for the benefit of the club, I think they're talking something like 100 million per year for this. And that's a lot of money that could maybe help Manchester United. There's not many clubs that could put that kind of fee on it. So it's something that will be considered. Do I like the idea? No. But I think Andy Mitten said something really interesting in a piece the other day, that 20 years ago or so, this would have been totally outrageous. And it would have been a possibility at the time, but totally outrageous. You couldn't see eye to eye with it at all. But maybe 20 years on, people can maybe see that maybe it is more necessary. You know, to consider as well, we have to consider as well is with the Glazers mismanagement for 18 years. The Radcliffe's coming in here and has to make some big changes to fix things. You know, he spent over £1 billion to be in this position. He now has to make some cuts. We've seen today as well with 250 workers are now going to be made redundant. And look, United had more employees than any other club in the Premier League last season, and this probably had to come. But at the end of the day as well, it's 250 people that are now going to be without work. It's sad news as well for people, but I think what all I care about is, will this benefit United? Can we be more efficient with our money? Because we haven't been for years. All we've been doing is fucking funding the Glazers.
Anybody who saw Radcliffe and Ineos coming into this club and didn't expect someone to come in and like kind of have an overlook of the whole situation, the system as a whole, how many cogs are in the wheel, you're naive to think he's not going to come in and try and streamline this, make it more efficient, cut costs where necessary. This guy is not an idiot. Like, this guy has built businesses. It's what he does. He makes things tick. He makes it work. He makes it efficient, and he makes it successful. I can understand his idea. I can understand why he's coming in. He's looking at the staff, the employee wage bill, the number of staff, how he can cut, I suppose, outgoing costs and whatnot. But it is a bit of a kick in the buttocks. And like, to see 250 people who work at United, obviously love the club, possibly been there for a long time. It's an awful kick in the bollocks for them to come in this morning to work, and all of a sudden 250 of you won't be coming back shortly. It leaves a bit of a sour taste. It's probably the first decision that he's made so far that actually does leave a really, really sour taste in people's mouth.
Absolutely, but look, we all knew that tough decisions were going to come. In all departments. A few weeks ago, and we spoke about when we first started speaking to Shaun on this episode about Erik ten Hag, and there was a saga around his future. And I think it was always going to be that way, and now shortly it's going to be players. Moving on, before we wrap things up, we've got a few questions that we want to get to from our loyal listeners, and the first one is someone that myself and Shaun know. He's been writing for Stretty News and Theatre of Red, Jerry Kelleher. And it's a good question. Thoughts on the apparent new strategy going forward with the youngish players under 25? I know we kind of touched on this, but as a strategy, isn't this something that we've been really calling for years, to be getting in players that are hungry, that haven't reached the heights of their career yet, and that are coming to Manchester United to do that? Shaun, I get you to answer that one about the new strategy moving forward.
Absolutely. It's a strategy that we need to embrace very, very much so. But it needs to be done in such a way that you can keep a certain level of experience and integrity inside in the dressing room. We see it with Tom Heaton sign a contract extension. You know, Tom has played little to no football, but his experience and his knowledge of the club, having come through the academy and being able to lead and be that leader as a voice inside the dressing room, is huge. We need to move so far away from what would be marquee signings and individuals that are coming for a payday. We need to be able to embrace talented footballers, and be they English or anywhere on the continent, who have an ability to be able to shine on the greatest of stages, and that they can do so at a football club that by and right is alongside Real Madrid as the biggest football club in the world. It doesn't matter if you have imagery and videos of water pouring through the roof on a rainy day in Manchester. It doesn't matter how much we've been mismanaged over 2 decades. Manchester United is always going to remain Manchester United. We need a squad that is befitting of the stature of this football club. We need a squad of footballers that want to play, and we need a squad of footballers that are ready, healthy, and competitive, that they can challenge one another to be able to fight for a starting berth on a weekly basis. Like, it's all good and well to have someone that I admire massively in Rasmus Højlund leading the line, a young guy, 21 years of age, all the talent in the world. We look at the likes of Ruud van Nistelrooy potentially coming in, who's going to embrace him and hopefully bring him to another level as well. But then if you can add someone like Joshua Zirkzee for what is a minuscule fee in 2024, he's a young, hungry, talented footballer who's not even entering his peak yet. This is exactly what we need. We need guys that are striking each other for competition, and we need a dressing room full of really, really eager footballers that understand what it means to play for that badge, and that maybe one day I can emulate what Ruud van Nistelrooy did. So, I mean, I know Jerry well, obviously, and I couldn't agree more. I speak with Jerry about this regularly. This is something that we have been crying out for on this podcast alone since the three of us started speaking. This is absolutely what we need, but we cannot forget the fact that we need to have a couple of wily old heads amongst them to be able to give them a kick in the arse if and when it's required.
This Xerxes boy who's coming in, again, as always, won't claim to know anything about a fella I don't know enough about, but his profile, his transfer fee, his stature in the game, kind of what level he's at. When he comes into United, is he coming in to directly compete with Rasmus Højlund for that spot week in, week out? He's obviously not going to sign for United and just go, fuck it, I'll sit in the bench and let your man have the spot. That's obviously coming directly as competition, attacking Højlund's spot in the team, I assume, yeah?
I think United can look at this in the way of him coming in being a young player and wanting to prove himself on the biggest stage. We've also got Højlund, who we can reflect now on his first season at the club and say that he showed plenty of promise. He might say that he wished he scored more goals in his first season, right? He probably feels that he could have done a little bit better. And that's fair enough. I'm more than happy to go with him. But Ten Hag should be looking at this and bringing a young striker and keeping that competition going, keeping that little edge in the team that maybe it's not secured. We are signing a new striker and he's around your age and you're going to have to fight for your place, because if you're talking about players that are the right fit for Manchester United, I don't think anyone then in that case should be guaranteed really a place in the team. There's certain ones that Shaun mentioned, the experienced old heads, the people I think about like Bruno Fernandes or whatever. But no one should be given a given right to start every week. I think you look at models of this currently are Garnacho and Manu, right? They don't have a given right to be in the team. They fucking demand it week in, week out that they're in that United team. And I think that's what we need from Xerxes or for Highland next season is when you're starting, make sure you're starting next week by doing your job. And if you don't, the competition is there to come in.
It's the same Bruno Fernandes that you sensationally said one of the last podcasters that the three of us did that you'd let go from the club. Just clarify. Just I need to know.
We'll have to clarify that one. I think what I did say was that with Rashford and Fernandes, maybe one could go this summer, and I think that could still be a possibility. Did you miss the stories about Bruno Fernandes' future, or is he just looking for a new contract?
I'm only just throwing a spitball and a hypothetical question at you, just clarifying your outrageous, outlandish claim in one podcast for you said some
Well,
stuff about Bruno Fernandes that I wasn't overly impressed with. Dale, I'll have to call you out this. I wasn't happy.
I've been
I'm gonna
called
go.
that.
I'm gonna go one further now, right? Because obviously we have the release of the new football kit, for the new year, and we have all the players that are there. Did you notice that Mr. Amrabat is pictured in the new kit?
So is Casemiro, though.
That's true.
Do we think?
That's
Do we
true.
think Casemiro's going to be there? I hope not, because
Yeah.
if he stays, that's just a matter of people not coming and making an offer.
The new kit launch, if you take it at face value, Garnacho's pictured wearing number 6. So I think there's a lot of things we can let slide in this kit launch, and I assume some of the lads won't be still there. But Amrabat is an interesting one because he probably is he on the verge of being signed permanently? Would you keep him?
I'm gonna go out here now and I'm gonna say this because I know we had many heated conversations about this over the last 12 months. I think Sofyan Amrabat is the definition of the easiest decision Manchester United could make this summer. You have a guy that is a good age profile. He has had very limited time, but obviously featured in 4 of the last 5 games. And when you saw the system integrate and you had him playing alongside Kobbie Mainoo, I think he was better than good. I'm not going to say he was amazing. I'm not going to say he was immense, but he was better than good. He was a very good player. And when you can get an international caliber footballer at that age profile who now knows what it means to play for United in the Premier League, you're talking about getting him for about 20 million euros. And this fits what we're talking about the dynamic of bringing in players for a minuscule fee. Let's say, for argument's sake, it doesn't work. In 12 months' time, are you going to struggle to get 20 million euros for Sofyan Amrabat? No, you're not even close to it. So to me, I would keep him in a heartbeat.
I wouldn't be completely against it, as you mentioned, with the 20 million. But I would rather get him at a bit of a better fee than that, given his age. And I'm not sure that if he doesn't come to United for 20 million, I'm not sure that AC Milan and those clubs will spend that money. But look, the last 5 games of the season when he was played in his preferred role and he had a few games behind him, he was brilliant. And before
He's
the
only
FA Cup
27.
final, he was 27, sorry.
He's only 27
Before,
years of age, tell you.
yeah, but I just think his ceiling, you're right, the fee, but I'd rather sign a midfielder with a higher ceiling with potential if we're spending 20 million. What I will accept is, though, he did have those run of 5 games, and I did want him to start the FA Cup final ahead of Casemiro. 100%. That decision had to be made. And he was crucial in that FA Cup win over City. So I wouldn't be totally against it. I think I definitely warmed to him in that run of 5 games because I was very critical of him last season. I thought he was a bad boy, even on loan. I just never thought he settled. It was unfair that he was shoehorned into different roles. But when he did get his run as a number 6, he performed a lot better than what we see from Casemiro last season.
Exactly. And you see, even from that brief cameo at the end of the year, he's given you food for thought and allowed you to rethink your entire dynamic on him. Also, and what I'm saying with it being 20 million, it's euros. Like, I mean, I've mentioned Archie Gray. Archie Gray has gone to Spurs for a fee between 25 to 30 million sterling. You know what I mean? So 20 million euros for a 27-year-old full international who shines for Morocco and showed that he can do it for Manchester United at the end of the season. I mean, you'd have to put it into the perspective. Imagine if he was playing for Fiorentina and we were trying to get him. Do you think we'd get him for 20 million euros right now? Not a chance. We would not.
Not a chance. But look, Brian, next question for you from Neil Crode. Would you sign an experienced striker backup option of the mould of Falkrug from Germany or Morata from Spain to help Rasmus Højlund? Just kind of similar to what we were saying about Xerxes, but would you go down the route instead of more experience, or do you like going younger?
I think last summer when Highland came in, and when you looked at the squad and the shape of the squad and the options we had available up front, back then I was screaming out for someone to come in, more experience, probably with less ambition to take the number one spot. This summer, again, I was probably leaning towards something similar to that until I saw the focus change to the Xerxes lad. The kind of the mindset change again of having two lads fighting it out. I've always quoted this or said this quote of competition breeds excellence. The best chance you have of getting the best out of someone is have someone on their heels trying to get their spot. That's when they're going to give you the best of themselves. So I think we're probably looking at moving away from the aging striker and the older backup who's happy to sit in the bench and play the bit role and come in and cover when Hyland's injured. It looks like the transfer strategy is to bring in a younger lad to compete directly with him. I'm all for it. I hope it works out. But you're also kind of putting your eggs in the basket of two young-ish strikers. You're hoping one of them clicks.
And on that note, Shaun, is there any player in particular from the Euros, based on the performance, that you would bring to United this summer? Who's excited you in Germany?
From the Euros, see, this is a terrifying thing. This is something I spoke about with a couple of my buddies recently. And I spoke about like the premise of signing players on World Cup performances and all that. You think of like a James Rodriguez from Colombia. It's very, very difficult to pick a player. I think it's going to be an obvious one, but like when you look at the likes of Germany, you look at Musiala. I mean, he's a sensational footballer, really, really good. Off the top of my head, if I was trying to get someone to be really, really savvy, I suppose you're looking at the likes of Turkey or somebody like that to be able to pull some sort of an unknown stalwart. His name now escapes me, but what's the young Turkish lad that Real Madrid signed last year? And he's starved for game time. I think they bought him from Fenerbahce, and his name has just escaped me as I'm speaking now.
I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I suppose, look, from what I've seen in the tournament so far, I mean, there's a good few standouts, but I have a certain affiliation with Musiala. I think he's a fantastic footballer, and even though he'd probably cost about 300 million, he's young enough and he's a good profile, so that's what I go for.
I'm going to say Nico Williams from Spain. I think he'd be a good buy for United with a relatively decent release clause. We have another question from Garcy for Brian. What is Brian going to do if Fulham sign McTominay? Dun dun dun.
It's a ludicrous question because we've seen in the Euros Jude Bellingham and McTominay. Is there a difference bar nationality? Hypothetical bullshit. No way he arrives at Fulham. He's staying. He is part of the club, part of the fabric, loves United like I do. He's going nowhere. Garcy, forget about it.
I think it would be a mistake to sell McTominay because there's loads of players that you could deem sellable, right? If we had our own way, we chop and change loads of players, but that's just not going to happen. And as you mentioned, if you sign 11 players, they're not all going to gel. There's certain players that need to be part of this process over the next 2 or so years. McTominay is one of them. His impact last season speaks volumes with the goals he scored in the Premier League in important games. And I think his willingness to do that at times as a bit part role was crucial. Someone that came through the academy, and I would, on that basis, and the fact that he's found a new role in the team, think he's one that should be kept. Shaun, where are you on McTominay?
Yeah, I like McTominay. I think McTominay is he's a good player. I think one of the things that stands out to me about McTominay the most, and it's only an assumption I make, but I suspect he is a proper leader in the dressing room. You know, I think on the training field, in the dressing room, I think he's probably a massive leader. I think he probably amplifies what Eric Ten Hag says an awful lot because I suspect, given his work rate and his tenacity, that he truly wants to be the best version of himself that he can. Obviously, he's got limitations in what he's able to achieve. I think when he's put into a midfield 2 or even a midfield 3, he goes missing. But it's undeniable when he makes those final third runs and he makes those marauding runs into the box. He's so dangerous. And look, he chipped in with so many vital goals. I think he's a guy that's invaluable. Like if you were struggling in a game, to bring him on for 15 to 20 minutes at the end to try to put pressure on a tired defence and get a goal, because he's very, very good at it. As you said, there's other individuals within the squad that we should be considering to get rid of before you're getting rid of McTominay. Do I think McTominay excels in any one capacity or one trait? I don't. I think McTominay is the definition of a guy at Manchester United who's a jack of all trades. Like he's not truly masterful at any one particular scenario. And I'm not saying that to upset you, Brian, but I've always been a fan of McTominay. I like McTominay. I like what he brings to Manchester United. I like his leadership. I like his desire and his like I'll never forget that goal that he scored with the last game before COVID, and just how much it meant to him skidding down the site. He's a player that can't leave, and it's not for ability. It's more so for what he offers.
It sounds like you're talking about your least favorite dog. Go on, Brian.
I suppose a more serious answer, and probably echoing what Shaun is saying, he's the kind of fella you want around the squad. His mentality, his personality, his willingness to be absolutely dedicated to the cause. And he definitely strikes me as a lad inside the dressing room who he's just a good lad to have around the team. Definitely a good lad for the younger players coming through. He's not a world-class phenomenal baller by any means. He is what he is. But look back on the decades gone by, we always had players in that ilk of McTominay, your Fletchers, your Parks, your Phil Neville's, your John O'Shea's. They weren't superstars, but they did a job for you when you need them. I think he'd be off your fucking head to get rid of him. I honestly would.
I don't think he's in the same ballpark as Park, though.